What did you think watching that last night, and what do you think of the assessments today?
Well, first of all, the president's address was monumentally right. Fortunately, he took the off-ramp. We were headed toward a possible high-intensity battle with the Iranians in the Persian Gulf. No one wanted that, certainly not Mr. Trump politically and not the Iranians. It would have been devastating. So I think it is to be applauded. Last night's attack, I don't want to give too much goodwill to the Iranians about symbolism of their attack. We are ferociously dug in on all these bases in Afghanistan and Iraq. We got wonderful anti-missile systems we got out of the Navy. We actually shoot down mortar rounds and missiles when they're inbound. And we were alerted. We didn't need to be alerted by the Iranians. We get launch on warning. We watch the missiles come up. They tell us the impact point. So I think it was fortunate these well-trained troops didn't get hit. But look, at the end of the day, the monumental blunder of hitting Soleimani at the Baghdad airport and also killing a Shia militia leader was just astonishing. A Mar-a-Lago conversation, Secretary Esper and Mark Milley show up, no White House Situation Room, no marshaling of allies, no engagement of Congress. This was amateur hour. It scared to death out of Mr. Trump, I'm convinced, and he ran for the exit wisely.
You know, General McCaffrey, the assessment of this monumental blunder being put in motion by the president, and then his human reaction to that, what you describe as a monumental blunder being fear, is an assessment I've heard from two former senior intel officials. And I wonder if that's what you see from watching it, now the way we watch a lot of it. What do our allies see in this president?
Well, I think it'd be fascinating to hear at a given moment in time what's being said about the Trump administration. Look, one advantage Mr. Trump's got is he scares our enemies and our allies alike to death. Impulsive decisions, they may not make any sense for U.S. national security purposes. Some of it's bluster babble. We're going to hit antiquities and UNESCO sites, and what would that mean? The Marines would guard Smithsonian Institute. I mean, some of this is just complete nonsense. By the way, the U.S. Armed Forces would not carry out a strike in clear violation of international law. They're not going to do it. They'll tell the president in writing that, and then they'd engage Congress, and we'd be at a constitutional crisis. So there's just a lot of nonsense going on. The problem is, at the end of the day, the Iranians have an undiminished capacity to strike us. You can kill a general and we'll replace him an hour later. These are robust organizations. The Iranians want us out of Iraq. It's likely that's going to happen. The Shiite plurality of the country now is hostile to U.S. interests. We're vulnerable. We stopped the anti-ISIS fight completely. And by the way, the Iranians apparently are tooling up the nuclear program again. So we're in a very bad position in the long run.
Claire McCaskill, just to keep General McCaffrey's sort of articulate description of where we are alive, a monumental blunder followed by a speech today that succeeded in de-escalating last night's crisis, where it really was the assessment of everybody watching and people in and outside of the government that it could have gone either way. Where are we right now?
Well, here's where we are. What has changed since Soleimani was killed? They have united the Shia factions within Iraq. The populist arm of the Shia faction in Iraq is now pounding the table, saying, get the United States out of here. They used to be saying, get Iraq out of here. You have the people of Iran united. We had demonstrations in the streets. There was real tension in Iran around this government. Now you're seeing this coming together of the Shia in Iran and the Shia in Iraq. And frankly, the bad guys that are out there, these militias, Soleimani had some discipline over them. Lord only knows now how disciplined these proxy forces are going to be whether they're the Shia militia in Iraq or whether they're the bad actors in Syria or whether they're the bad actors in Turkey or Afghanistan or wherever they are. So I'm not sure how our national security has been enhanced by this exercise, but it sure was a wake-up call for the rest of the world that this president was willing to do things that were certainly beyond ordinary.
Well, beyond ordinary and put on the table by a Pentagon leadership that never thought he'd choose this option. I mean, there is a part of this story that represents the miscalculation of the kinds of officials who are still around, and there aren't many of them, so I don't want to disparage them. But the people that went to Trump, it's been reported by the New York Times and other news organizations, didn't think he'd pick this option.
Right.
And I think the public, with all of the scar tissue around Iraq and Afghanistan, can hold two thoughts in their mind. Yes, Soleimani was a heinous individual with the blood of American soldiers on their hands, and we're in more risk now because of what we did.
Exactly. Spoiler alert, our national security is not enhanced by this. It's probably degraded. I think we know how this plays out, really, in the large sense, because we have the example of North Korea. The hawks are all saying, the president showed that deterrence works, and he hit the followers of John Bolton are all terribly encouraged that we're going to have this uber hawkish policy toward Iran. And we're not. I mean, we saw the president back away from the brink today, just as he backed away from his fire and fury rhetoric about North Korea. Remember that he was supposed to be the tough guy who was going to bring North Korea to the table on bended knee, and they're just merrily going about making more nuclear weapons and wagging like this at Donald Trump. And again, with Iran, he is not going to follow through with what the Uber hawks want. Now, I happen to think that's a good thing because it would be an apocalyptic Middle East war, but that's what's going to happen.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.